And so we just a reminder to turn off your mics and videos, and then we can get started. So welcome everybody. There is a big group of people today, and I'm so excited to have everybody here joining today. Thank you for waiting in the waiting room. Some of you joined a little bit earlier, and thank you for waiting for just after 1. We wanted to make sure we got everything ready. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Elaine, and my pronouns are she, her, and I work here at TELUS Spark in Calgary, Alberta. And I'm really excited to be talking to you today to celebrate Science Literacy Week with a presentation by Jordan Witzel. And this presentation is proudly supported by TELUS Spark Science School. So before we begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that TELUS Spark Science Center is situated on the traditional lands of the Niitsitapi Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Kainai, Piikani, Siksika First Nations, and the Blackfeet of Montana, who have made this land home for thousands of years. In 1877, Treaty 7 was signed by members of the Niitsitapi, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Ayahe Nakota, inclusive of the Wesley, Chiniki, and Bearspaw First Nation, alongside the Government of Canada. The city of Calgary is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, all newcomers and settlers. We are all treaty people. So personally, this means a lot to me because it gives me the opportunity to be teaching you or talking to you today, and for TELUS Spark to be able to teach everyone about science and share that knowledge. And it was only made possible because of the caretakers who were here before us and who are here now. So let's get started with our presentation. We are partnering with, well, I'm going to let him introduce himself formally, but we're partnering with Jordan Witzel, who, as far as I can tell, is a really awesome person and cool guy, and a lot of fun during the times I've talked to him. So, and he is going to talk to us about climate and society. So he's going to give us a presentation, which will take roughly about 40 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer period afterwards. And if you have any questions throughout the talk, feel free to put them into the chat. We have a channel called, or a host, one of our hosts, TELUS Spark Q&A. You can enter your chat and direct it to that person specifically. That's Lauren, who's over to my right, and then we can get to them at the end of the chat. But otherwise, I'm going to pass it on to Jordan. So go ahead.
I have a lot to live up to, Elaine. Now you've called me cool. So I'm trying my best, everybody, to be cool and I intend the pun here, in a conversation that's going to talk about warmth. I'll try and keep things cool. Excuse me as I clear my throat here. But thank you so much for joining this lesson, this conversation here for the next hour. It's great to see so many classrooms engaged from across the country. So welcome to all of you, whether it is that you find yourself in a classroom in Alberta this morning or just a little further across the country. I know we've got people from almost every province who are on this presentation right now. So yeah, my name is Jordan Witzel. And I have been practicing as a meteorologist and a climatologist for just under 20 years now, about 18 years, most of that in broadcasting as a weather guy on TV in the morning and through evening news programs over all of the years. So you will no longer find me on television, but I still do a lot of work as a meteorologist and as a climatologist in my private life and for other companies outside of television. So I'm really excited to share some of my expertise in climate. Much of what we're going to cover today is in fact a graduate level course in university that I prepared for Athabasca University a few years ago. But so much of it is very important. And even though it is taken from a university course that I developed, and you guys aren't in university just yet, it is all really understandable and really important for you younger folks to hear this message and really understand it, because you are the generation that's going to take over this challenge of climate change action. And I firmly believe that you are the age of people that are going to make a difference in a positive direction, because I'll say this much, people my age and people older than me have so far failed at this battle against climate change. So I'm going to share my screen. And you'll still get to see my silly mug at times here, but if I'm off to the side, I think. But the important part is all of the things that I'll be sharing with you. I think you might have heard my buzz, so maybe I should log out of one extra thing, and we'll get going. So what we're going to talk about is climate change and society. How does climate change actually fit into our community, whether it's a local community in the town that you live in or the province that you're in, that provincial community, to the national community of Canada, but even abroad, it is a global issue that we're talking about when we talk about climate change. And so my discussion today is an invitation to you to take action. And again, as I said, as a younger generation, you guys really are set to be at the front of that engaged action and really take charge in this in the years to come. So it's really important now that we give you some really solid information that you can take forward in your journey. Climate change is real. We are far beyond, as scientists, we are beyond even having that conversation anymore of folks who will say it isn't real. And we're going to go through a little bit of that first, so you can really gain some information in order to take action. You don't want to take action without being fully informed. So really finding innovative solutions, really new and cool and workable solutions to reversing the effects of climate change on the health of all inhabitants of the planet has escaped us humans for decades. We are at the top of the chain of intellect in many ways. I won't say all ways of all of the inhabitants of the earth, but in many ways we are top of the intellect, and we are the population of animals on this planet that can really make this change for everyone involved on Earth. But it hasn't been an easy process for us so far. There are a lot of barriers, things that have stopped us or blocked us as humans from changing how we live and interact with the planet. But we're seeing it more recently, some action from a few people. We're seeing the ripple effect that it can have to inspiring others. And we're right in that moment where I want to take a few ripple effects that maybe you've heard about in the world, and I want to amplify them to you so that perhaps you're inspired to take action as well. So you really do fit into making some change, even though you might feel sometimes lost as one person in a big community on a massive global. You really do have the opportunity to make change. So I've got a lot of fun cartoons. This gentleman, his last name is Magnin, down at the bottom there. And actually his name's Alexander Magnin, and I believe he lives in Vancouver now. He is a Canadian artist, and he makes a lot of cartoon sketches about climate change specifically. So we've got this bus full of humans heading toward this wall of climate change. And there are other things on there. Look at this pollution. There's social injustice, which is a little bit of a broader term than just climate change. But some people face injustice as it comes to climate, because there's certain folks in parts of the world that face greater dangers to climate so far, just because where they live, the climate has changed more drastically. And those folks have not had an opportunity to speak up for themselves. And so this is where you can come in and start to speak up for people instead of making excuses or yelling at each other like everyone on this bus is doing. No one's really getting along. They all seem divided. I also have some quotes for you. Sir Richard Attenborough, he might be someone you know. You probably have heard his voice if you've ever watched the documentary series Planet Earth. He is the gentleman who voices that, but he is a big advocate speaking up for some of the climate change issues. So he says it's tempting and understandable to ignore the evidence and carry on as usual, or be filled with doom and gloom. Those are the easy ways out. And I do promise you that I'm going to fill you with a bit of doom and gloom here in this presentation. But we're also going to shine a light on the potential for things we can do. And Richard Attenborough says we need to move beyond guilt or blame and get on with the practical task at hand. So he says, get off that bus and get on with the task at hand. Knock that wall down and drive through together. Climate change speaks to global temperatures changing. Now, they've been on a continuous rise. 20 of the hottest years on record have occurred since 1998. Basically, since 1998, every year has set a record for being a warmer year, or at least one of the warmest years. That's since 1998. Climate factors are a direct cause of economic collapse. So that is the way we handle money, the way businesses operate in parts of the world, the way people make a living and have an income. That is changing because of climate factors. It's causing climate conflict, and we'll talk a little bit more about why. And subsequently, climate refugees, and some of that leads into conflict, that in certain parts of the world, people have to move because they no longer have access to water or food because of the changing climate. So they become refugees who now put more of a stress in another part of the world as they move to find water or food or safer living conditions. They're putting stress on a new part of the world. So everything is connected. Rising temperatures affect the Earth's many physical and biological systems as each interacts with each other. So this temperature rising trend, it should concern all of us. Increasing heat has already come to affect many of those lesser developed countries. We're seeing that consequence of human-induced global warming in North America as well. How sick and tired are you of all of the smoky summers we've had for the last 5 years? Perfect evidence of climate change. Rising temperatures affect the Earth's many physical and biological systems as each interacts with each other. So we've seen that the oceans capture less carbon dioxide. Oceans work to capture carbon dioxide. Some of the animals, just one example, some of the animals that have shells in the ocean, the only way that they can make those shells is by digesting carbon in the water. But that carbon gets into the water through a series of cycles where the water actually captures it from the air. So once that water is filled up with carbon dioxide and there's more carbon dioxide in the air, there's no more room for that CO2 to go into the ocean. Everything is saturated. And so what happens? Those temperatures get warmer. And that's what we've been seeing for decades. So you've seen images of climate change with wildfires here in Canada and the United States. There's more concern from more people living here in North America that they're going to be harmed by climate change. But most people also say that they don't think they can do much to change it, but you can. So there have been reports for years from a group called the IPCC. It's the International Panel on Climate Change. They do a report almost every year, and they just came out with a very big report. It continues to say that as we warm even 1.5 degrees across the planet, things will change, okay? So I know I promised you some doom and gloom here, but we'll get through the doom and gloom and then we'll talk about good things. So it is true that the Earth's climate is continually changing, but it's sometimes cooling and sometimes warming. Maybe you've heard this argument from people. The Earth is currently in a natural warming period known as the Holocene epoch. It's just one moment in a continuous cycle of climate on Earth. So things change based on how close the Earth is to the sun. That fluctuates over thousands of years. There are other factors as to in space where the Earth is rotating, not just by seasons, but there are many different factors that contribute to this natural cycle on Earth of climate change, okay? Sometimes it's global warming, sometimes it's global cooling, but it is all climate change. Normal cycle. Some climate change deniers will call attention to climate change as a natural tendency of the Earth's atmosphere, just a rebalancing all the time. They say that, hey, we're already in a warming period. Of course, we're seeing global warming. And for thousands of years, we've seen that when we document global temperatures. But what we saw in the last 200 years was an acceleration of the amount of heat. And as I showed you earlier, the last 20 years have been the warmest ever, year after year. So the Holocene epoch has been amplified. It's been increased by human activity. It's that CO2 that is in the atmosphere at higher amounts that has accelerated warming. It's just chemistry. Carbon dioxide helps to capture more heat in a container. So we think about the whole globe as a container, and the more CO2 and other gases that get pushed into it through pollution contribute to that warming. So yes, the overall sort of give and take of cold and warm, it makes our weather, it forms our climate, it has been averaging toward warmer and accelerating since the Industrial Revolution, where we really started industry and mass production of things. So just remember this. This is what I want you to take from this. Earth has always experienced climate change. Some people will say this is all just part of that natural activity, but it is proven by science that the warming has been accelerated by human activities as we've increased some of those gases in the atmosphere. So global warming is just one part of climate change, right? You could have global cooling. We're stuck in global warming. The end of it, there are laws of nature that don't care whether you believe in this or not. It is not about belief, it is about fact. If you stand in a tree and you let go, let's pretend you didn't believe in gravity. Do you think you would float? So the same thing with climate change. You're going to fall. And whether we want to believe the evidence or not, climate change is there. And in many ways, we're seeing it with more extreme weather everywhere in the world. Okay, one of my favorite stories, which of course has been adapted into a movie as well, but Dr. Seuss back in 1971 wrote the story, The Lorax. This is a little excerpt from it. I've got a few of them throughout the presentation. There's no cause, I'll try my best to rhyme this, okay? I'm not a poet. There's no cause for alarm. I chopped just one tree. I'm doing no harm. I'm being quite useful. This thing is a sneed. I lost the cadence of it. All of you teachers who do the poetry and English and all of that are going to laugh at me here. I'll try. Here we go. A sneed's a fine something that all people need. It's a shirt, it's a sock, it's a glove, it's a hat. But it has other uses, yes, far beyond that. You can use it for carpets, for pillows, for sheets, or curtains or covers for bicycle seats. The Lorax said, "Sir, you are crazy with greed." So there's a gentleman here who is trying to develop something from cutting down a bunch of trees. If you're not familiar with the Lorax, the story of the Lorax. And the Lorax is a steward, a representative of the earth and the environment. And he keeps challenging this gentleman on what he is doing, that he's destroying the environment. So if you're not familiar with the story, and hey, teachers, maybe that opens you up to watching the Lorax at some point at the conclusion of your interest in climate and weather. It would be a good break that the kids would get to watch the Lorax. It's a great movie, or you could simply read the book. Okay, how about this? Here's another cartoon by our friend Alexander. So we're in this boardroom of important people with this important company. Our strategy is simple. Sell people a lot of stuff. Sell them bigger homes so they can store it all. Sell them bigger cars so they can carry it all around. Rent them storage units so they can store even more. Sell them credit cards so they can buy even more and more and more. Now, the person putting up their hand, I know this is a little harsh, but she says, "Are you sure people will be stupid enough to do that?" It doesn't make us stupid to do this. It doesn't make us stupid to want things. It is human nature. It's part of our society, but it is also an opportunity for us to make a few changes between our wants and our needs. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the presentation here. But here's this big company building its model on selling us a whole bunch of stuff, some stuff that we don't need. And so the question is, can we disrupt this? Can we make a change to this? Okay. Sure, there are things that we will always need, and it's okay to want some things. But to what level are we starting to have a really bad impact on those around us and the earth itself? So back to Dr. Seuss. Thanks to your hacking my trees to the ground, there's not enough truffle of fruit to go round. But business is business, and business must grow, regardless of crummies in tummies, you know. All right, I think I got my reading of Dr. Seuss down now. I've got the actual pattern that I'm supposed to read in it. So as we get to more, maybe I'll be able to continue that way. Okay, here's an interesting question. If you and your friends went outside and on your street and started beating up someone's car, you'd get in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you? All the money that they've invested in that, a nice car, it's illegal. You would get in trouble, the police would be called, and you'd be in a lot of trouble for vandalism. But there are a large group of people who see us, you know, cutting down trees is just one example. It's very simplified. Just by cutting down trees alone does not mean we're accelerating global warming. But of course, it has contributed. It's just one thing, progress, that development, that let's clear more stuff out. Let's build more stuff. Let's make more things. Let's buy more things. And you'll hear politicians and business leaders sometimes say, well, that's the price of progress, right? But is it really progress? And that's what Alexander Megnan is saying here. He's questioning that with that cartoon. So let's talk about how climate change affects us. It's health and safety. These are two things you have a right to. These are rights that are outlined under international law. So these are things that aren't just by being fortunate to be a Canadian, you have a right to. A right is something that no one can take away from you, okay? So you have a right to health and safety. That is outlined in international law. It is why some countries will go and help other countries, because populations in another country have had that right taken away. They live in a situation where there is no health and no safety. And so others will try and help them by that international law. So understand that. You have a right to health and safety. But climate change impacts us in these ways. It changes the shape of infectious diseases which can infect you, water and food supply, animal diseases and human diseases, plant disease as well. So all of those falling under that infectious disease, and extreme weather. I think you'd agree with me that all of these items would in some way impact your health and how safe you are, okay? So let's talk about this just a little bit. Elevated carbon dioxide. It's associated, it has been research, scientific research, not stuff you find on Facebook, not people saying this is what they believe and it's fact. Scientific research in labs. Carbon dioxide concentrations that get higher, they're associated with decreased human ability of the brain. Okay, so your brain doesn't perform as well if you inhale excess carbon dioxide. Climate change influences the transmission of diseases from insects and other animals, food and waterborne diseases. So we can get diseases from drinking dirty water, from food that is infected, or even animals and insects included under those animals. I'm sure you've heard a lot of this with COVID. And some scientists are trying to argue and trying to do the research to connect even the spread of viruses like COVID to climate change, okay? It's not the sole reason or the main reason that COVID came to be. Viruses come and go anyway, but could it have got worse because of our climate? That's a question being asked, okay? But also it's hard for us to grow food and have that security when the climate affects the availability of water, okay? So climate will continue to change mass human movement around the world as people look for safe food and safe water because they don't want to get sick. And of course, conflicts and violence bubble up when people can't move freely or they can't find food and water. People get angry, people get hungry, people feel unsafe and unhealthy, and then they fight, okay? It all links back to climate change, to warming. There's also growing evidence that some cancers, including breast cancer, is caused mostly by environmental factors. So when you talk to doctors who deal with certain cancers, like breast cancer, there's only a small portion of folks who get that cancer who get it because it's just part of their genetic makeup. What scientists are finding is that the environment around us is having a huge impact on causing cancer. Cancer comes from a mutation because of toxins, and that's what these researchers are finding, right? So breast cancer is becoming a disease of our community, where the environment that women work and live in seems to have a massive influence on the health of their cells, and that creates the cancer. So those same researchers are arguing that climate change that the exposure to harmful atmospheric toxins, poisonous things like wildfire smoke in our atmosphere, can have a big impact on the chances of people developing cancers. Okay. Have you heard of Lyme disease and ticks? So ticks are little bugs, little insects that can burrow into your skin. You don't really feel them when they bite into you. I was once in the woods in a part of the United States that has always had ticks. It's out east, in Virginia, the state of Virginia. I was there. I was in a forest and I got bit by a bunch of ticks. I was lucky to not get Lyme disease. It is a very dangerous, debilitating disease for humans. And if you get bit by a tick, there is a chance you can get that disease, and there's no cure for it. You live with the problems it causes to your health for the rest of your life. So I've been bit by ticks. You don't feel it. It doesn't hurt, but you can get Lyme disease. The point of it is, where I got bit by those ticks about 10 years ago in Virginia, that's an area that's always had ticks in North America, or at least for a longer period of time. They like warmer climates. They're starting to spread. They spread into Ontario, into Manitoba years ago, and now they're spreading into the Rocky Mountains. So there are ticks in parts of BC and Alberta now, and that is because of the changing climate. They have found places to move that are warmer, where they once weren't as warm. As well, have you ever driven through the Rockies? Have you been fortunate enough to go into the Rockies and you've seen some big parts of the forest that are just brown and the trees look dead? Well, that is due to the pine beetle. And maybe you've heard of the pine beetle, okay? Usually they can't survive really cold winters. So the pine beetle population is kept pretty small. But because of global warming, those pine beetles have been able to survive longer periods of time and then grow in their population and take over bigger parts of the forest in the mountains. And they're absolutely destroying much of the forest through the Rocky Mountains. So you can see that if you take a drive through the Rockies. And of course, this is something you've always heard about with climate. The Arctic and Atlantic Oceans, they're longer periods of time where there are no icebergs. They're free of ice. So it's showing that the water is warmer, and that changes cycles and the health of animals in the ocean when the water temperatures change. So you have very likely heard about that, about ice cover, about glacier cover, and about warming oceans. Okay, back to my cartoons. I like my cartoons. And this cartoon down at the bottom is called "The Economy is Just a Means to an End." So dad says, at least you made a lot of money before destroying the environment. And his kid says, yeah, what's for dinner, Dad? Something for you to think about. Look, he's trying to roast. He's trying to, instead of a hot dog, he's got a stack of bills on his roaster over the fire. Something to think about. So back to how climate change affects us. This is the core of the problem that we're going to start to dive into here. And I'm going to talk for still about maybe 10 or 15 more minutes, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So keep brainstorming those questions as we get close to the end of the presentation. The core of the problem. Climate change is a global issue. So when you only, let's put it this way. When you're when you're hanging out with your friends and you've got a problem between 3 of you, would that be an easier problem to find a solution to between 3 of you, as opposed to 20 of you? If you had more people throwing their hat in the ring saying, I think this, and I think that, and I think this, sometimes the bigger group makes it easy, sometimes the bigger group makes it hard. This is a big group issue. It affects everyone who lives on this planet. And because of that, everyone's got a different interest. So when I talk about that larger group project, let's pretend every one of those 20 people wants a different outcome. It's going to really be hard to figure out a solution with that large group of people, okay? And then in the situation of climate change, you have the fact that some people take advantage of people being divided. Okay, so we all have different interests going in. Some people want to continue to live in the big house. Some people want to continue to drive across country every weekend. Some people want to take 10 airplane trips in a year and aren't interested in cutting it down to 1 or 2 airplane trips if you can afford all of that. So we all have different interests. Some people want to grow on the other side of it. Some people want to grow their own food. And they want to have access to clean water just down the street. So there's a lot of issues at stake here. We're not just talking about Canadians who have access to clean water for the most part. Not all Canadians do. Okay? So some people are taking advantage of that, and we have to take back that power. So your local community, people who live right next to you, and you yourself, you can join a handful of active social movements, and you guys will be able to research. I'm going to point out a few, but you're able to research some social movements that are influencing some folks who are taking advantage of the division. Not all folks. I'm not sitting here saying all politicians and business leaders are taking advantage. Okay, they have certain interests, just like all of us. Their interests are oftentimes our interests, but we've really got to shift where we're going. And there are plenty of groups in our community that are doing that. Okay, here's another quote from Sir Attenborough. As a species, we are expert problem solvers. So at the beginning, I didn't go outright and say we're the smartest animal on the planet. We're not. But we're very intellectual in problem solving. Humans are built to recognize a pattern and then solve the issue around that pattern, okay? We're experts at it. We haven't applied ourselves to this problem with the focus it requires, says Sir Attenborough. We can create a world with clean air and water, unlimited energy, and fish stocks that will sustain us well into the future. But to do that, we need a plan. I guess you only care about all this if you like fish. So there, we're divided by an interest already. If you're like, ew, fish, I don't like seafood. You do have to understand that a healthy ocean environment means a healthy land environment. So we're all connected. All right. And that's what he's getting at. All right, now back to the cartoons. Here's an important person. Actually, he's a senator. Oh, actually, he might be a real senator now that I look at my cartoon. I bet you it's a made up name. But he says, I used to agree with you that climate change was real until I found how much it would cost to fix. So we found what divides his interest, okay? And then he starts saying climate change is a hoax. So what is a person's real interest, right? What are people really interested in changing and not changing? This is where you fit in. So complicated issues. They are complicated issues. You guys are young. Today is election day. It is a complicated day in our country for many reasons. And your parents should, and hopefully are, taking on that cause by voting. Okay, you guys are a little too young to vote still, but you're already of the age, and I'm giving you all the credit in the world. You are intelligent at your age, and you are better problem solvers than most adults. Okay, so complicated issues, you can get started now so that by the time you vote at 18, by the time you get to university age, whether you go to university, you can study things that interest you around this concept, or you can build business or work in a business in a way that shows better respect for our planet, okay? But you need to care first. And that's why now, right now, we're engaging you at your age to care just a little bit more, okay? So that's the purpose of exploring climate change, so that we can reflect, we can care, and then reflect on our own lifestyles and discover what positive social impact we can have on climate action. No longer climate change, let's take action. So I'm encouraging you from this point forward to rethink your own choices to begin seeing the personal impact you are having on the climate. That's just the first part. We're not going to put the blames all on ourselves, okay? We're going to do this together. And you're encouraged to share your review with your family. because people at different age groups have different interests and will try and share those interests for their benefit. So your parents, your uncles, your aunts, your grandparents, your teachers, they're not bad people. They might just have different interests than you do. And the only way we can come together in this group project is to start to talk about how we feel, how we review the impact we're having on the planet, and maybe sharing those ideas with those around us. And so that's a start. So this is a really simple diagram. Are you a part of the problem or the solution? Small choices that can make a big difference. And more than anything, it's not just about, I used the term climate change denier earlier, and they would say, come on. So instead of using this gas-powered leaf blower, I use human power, and you think I'm going to solve the entire world's problem? No, but it's a start. And if you do it and 10 neighbors see you do it, that has an impact. And it also has an impact on the production of leaf blowers. I'm not trying to attack those who have leaf blower businesses, but maybe because less people buy the gas-powered ones, those business owners now rethink their business and they go, I have to make changes. If I want to continue to make a living with my leaf blower business, I have to start getting battery operated ones because more people are buying those. Or maybe I should start to market a whole bunch of rakes and other tools that can make your leaf cleanup process easier. So you see that ripple effect, that by making a change, you have a ripple effect outward in your community to others considering change. Okay, a few examples here at home in Calgary, the Calgary Climate Hub. You can look them up and maybe you can start to get involved with them, or at least start to understand what they're doing and the groups that make them up. They've pushed for greater political action on climate change. I use the term mitigation here, but that's that climate action. Let's take climate action, okay? So they're pushing politicians. These are old, boring people. Unlike me, Elaine said I'm cool, so I'm not an old, boring person. I am. But at least they're starting to push politicians harder and harder too, okay? The Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, CAPE. So this is across the country. These are doctors who have come together and formed a group to say, hey, we recognize the impacts of climate on health, food, water, health, safety, the cancer that has been researched and seems to be increasing because of environmental conditions, right? Even the fact that death rates go up amongst the elderly and those with other health conditions, those people are at a higher risk of dying when we have those stretches of extreme hot weather in the summer. So these physicians recognize all of that. And they're saying, come on, let's make a change because climate is devastating the health of humans. So they've come up with action plans to politicians, but that's not all of it. It's not just all about yelling at politicians for change, okay? So these are some groups that you guys can check out as a class or on your own. It might inspire you to move into new directions of how you can make changes. These people are trying to make change, these groups, okay? Do you recognize this young woman? Back in 2019, it feels so much longer than that, but I think it's because we've lived through the pandemic now and time has stood still sometimes. But in 2019, Greta Thunberg mobilized students around the world to her climate activism. At the time she started, she was most of your guys' age. I believe she's now in university. But what she called it was a global strike for future. So what Greta did was she started at her school and it was a Friday walkout. So her and her friends, no one came to school on Friday. And they were peaceful strikes. They just walked out of their classroom on a Friday morning and they walked to a government building in town. And that was it. And everyone was like, what? I mean, think about your age. If you skipped school, you'd be in trouble. But then you and 5 friends skipped school. There'd be a deeper question from the principal. Why did you guys all leave? Where'd you go? And then what if the next Friday, 20 or 25 of you did it? And then what if the whole school did it? You're starting to grab the attention of people who are older than you, who might have a different interest, but start to see what your interest is and start to go, wow, okay, these kids are engaged. That's what Greta did. This became a global movement. Greta has been recognized around the world for her work. She has talked to major leaders. She's been recognized in magazine articles everywhere, small and large, okay? And it only took her a few short months to develop this from Europe through to, then she jumped, I believe, to Australia. It has become a movement on every continent that once a month, I think it's the third Friday of every month, kids skip out of school. They don't stay home. They make signs and they go to government buildings in their town and they demand change, okay? There are other groups. There's a group called the Transition Communities Group that's trying to build sustainable home owners, development toward homes that use less energy. And then this picture is from the Venus Project. This might seem like, okay, that's a little more wackadoodle and out there, and we'll never achieve that. Well, they're proposing an approach to civilization that's different, okay? So they have one that's based on human health as the main forefront of their civilization. Decisions are made on health and safety, nothing more, okay? So they're developing, that's a picture from Florida. It's not that they live in these bubbles that keep them safe from the outside. Those are part of their greenhouses for growing food. But their society is built around health and safety and making decisions with that, okay? So there is a lot going on that you can check out, okay? Individual actions can create change. It can happen. So it's at this point where we come to, yes, you're not going to escape it. I have some assignments for you. We're going to go, this isn't just, hey, let's talk about climate and walk away from it. We want to dive deeply, and I want to engage you. As I said at the beginning, this is an invitation to action. I hope that I can grab you and have you join the party on this side, okay? So first things first, reflect inward and ask yourself some tough questions. So that's the individual assignment. And your teachers are going to be provided with these questions with this assignment. And teachers, you can take shape to this assignment in any way you want. It can be just the individual portion. It can be the individual and group portion, or just the group portion. But then there's a third deeper dive that we're going to talk about as well. And I think that no matter what, it's really important because it's engaging us all to talk to each other and discover each other's interests so that we can find some respect for those interests and discover solutions. So here's the individual assignment, okay? We're going to whip through this real quick so we can get to questions, because teachers, I want you to, Elaine's team is going to provide you with the assignments. They're going to provide you with the entire presentation. So as a team in your class, you can all go back and look at the things I've presented and start to Google some things. And I'm not going to say do your own research. We need to change. Okay, I'm going to take a step aside here. I said I was going to whip through this last bit fast, but we need to change what we talk about as research versus discovery. And I want you to go on Google and do some discovery, okay? Research is when you really start to collect that data and go a little bit deeper, okay? This is just more about discovery, and I want you guys to do this. So make a list first of your lifestyle, the things you do, what you want in order to be happy and healthy versus what you need in order to be healthy and happy. And maybe you and your teachers can start that assignment by discussing wants versus needs. Maybe look at the definition, do a discovery of the definition of want versus need. Then you can talk about what's different between your lists, okay? I want a new car, but I only need a two-seater. But I really want that brand new SUV that's beautiful and big and has the third row in the back and would make traveling so much easier. But day to day, I really only need one that fits me and my spouse. That type of thing, you know? That's an example. What can you remove from your wants list and still meet your needs? What lifestyle changes have you been putting off for fear of difficulty, or even at any age, for fear of being made fun of? Okay, that's an important question, that third one. And even more difficult, what relationships or other social environments in your life are making it difficult to change? How can you get past those obstacles? Oftentimes, talking to people, communicating will solve some problems. Okay, so teams working together can also create change. So that's assignment, that's 1A, that's the first part of the assignment. All right, we're going to reflect outward and ask some tough questions of each other. The group assignment: how are social movements like Greta's pushing governments to address climate change? Okay, she didn't just go to governments and yell at them. She did in part, but that was the end result of something she did at the beginning. Okay, review some movements like Greta's. How can you push your local government officials to take a stronger stand? Again, today's election day. I know you don't get to vote, but I did. Your teachers did. Did we take climate action as something in our mind and in our hearts when we voted? I did. I'm not embarrassed to say that. It's very important that we talk about politics. What lifestyle changes can you make to contribute to climate action? Can you grow your own food? Can you walk or bike? Use the bus more often, public transit. Okay, and how would you accomplish that? You need to come up with a plan. You wouldn't just say, oh yeah, I could bike. Come up with a plan. All right, this is a group assignment of 4 or 5 people. In what other ways can your team adapt your lifestyles at school? What things is your classroom doing and your school doing that could meet your needs? Okay, so some good questions. The third breakout, going deeper. Teachers, you'll split those groups up and mix them. And you'll repeat the group assignment, but with the importance of starting to see how you made a decision with that first group. Was it hard to make a new decision with the second group? Were you able to come together with your old interests, and were you still able to come up with ideas and solutions to things? Okay. I hope that makes sense. Again, Elaine's team is going to provide all the teachers for that. This is your invitation to action. I want you to RSVP now. Do people know what RSVP is? I think it's a bit of Latin in it, but it's like reply. I don't know. Elaine, do you know? I'm going to call Elaine back in. Do you know what RSVP stands for? It's get back to me right now.
Yeah, it does. Oh yeah, we have a French class. Répondez s'il vous plaît, which is French. Please respond.
All right, let's go back and do it again. You know what? My kids are in French immersion, so if they were here and had taken the day off, I could have had them come back and do it all again. So much respect to the French class that joined. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah. So thank you, Jordan. That was I think you did prove you're cool. Even though you're talking about planet warmth, but also it definitely shows that you're extremely knowledgeable about this stuff, and as well as extremely passionate about this. So I am going to, maybe if you thought, would you like to have your PowerPoint still up there, or would you like to?
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
Yeah.
Then you guys can see my mug. There we go.
Yeah. So we have a few questions that were coming through during the chat. And so I think a lot of people were inspired. I'm just going to take a look over here. So let's just start. A lot of them are mainly about like climate, like about the climate in general. So one is, can landforms be changed by climate change?
They can by rising ocean levels. Okay, so there's that longer process of lands sort of shifting and moving, right? If you've ever, I'm sure, Elaine, right, at some point the Spark Science Centers across the country have had exhibits where you talk about tectonic plate movements. That movement has an impact. That's part of the cycle of climate change that we talked about that is natural, and it's very long in its process. But yeah, as we talk about getting warmer and melting glaciers, so glaciers are ice that are landlocked. So they're ice way up in mountains. But as they melt, they become water in the ocean. so it's that melting of glaciers that actually increases the amount of water in the ocean, and that is going to continue to have an impact. It's already been seen. Low-lying areas, coastal areas, people who live in those areas and rely on fishing and farming right against the ocean, they've already been devastated, and we're going to see more of that. So it has a huge impact on the land.
All right, I never even thought about it that way. Another question is, let's see, there's so many. Oh my goodness. I'm going to ask one that's a little really topical. Is it possible that the coronavirus was caused by, or I guess created by climate change?
Right. I think there's definitely a possibility, and I know I did allude to it a little bit. There's the chemistry and the biology of that disease coming to be through, as I understand it, bats. Okay. So I know that there's a lot of research in the process of trying to connect those dots and see, is that a possibility, or was it at least I'm gonna say outright, climate change did not create the coronavirus. But warmer environments usually make for viruses and bacteria, especially bacteria. And the coronavirus is not bacteria. So bacteria is something that's living. A virus is actually something that it has no life. A virus is I can't say an organism because it doesn't have life, but a virus has code in it, okay? And it has that code that is, when it gets in your body, it's enabled to create sickness. It's able to create things in your body that make you sick, reactions to that code and to that virus being in you that make you sick, okay? But nonetheless, viruses get moved around by organisms, by insects and animals. And so if those insects and animals are able to move across wider areas because there's more warmth and it's just more comfortable for that creature to move around and to populate further distances and to eat more food further distances, do you see how that animal has an advantage to perhaps spread some of its diseases, including viruses? So that's possibly what could happen, that the bats that had developed that virus over a period that the virus sort of mutates and develops and mutates and develops, and I'm not an expert on viruses at all, but the bats that then had that were able to spread it quicker, perhaps. Now, none of this I'm going to say is fact yet, because as I say, this has been a thing that's 2 years for us, and researchers are still doing that to see how climate may have, warmer environments may have contributed to the spread of COVID.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot more research that has to be done. I mean, it's relatively new in our lives, even though it's felt like forever.
And let me say this real quick. Did anyone ever hear Donald Trump, when he was still president, in the first wave, he said, well, when summer comes, what was it? When the summer or fall, he tried to say that warmer weather would disperse it. He was saying stuff that was based in science, that they were hopeful that when it was warmer, people would actually spread out from each other, and that really warm temperature wouldn't help the virus spread. There's science that says warm and cold will stop things from spreading or increase things from spreading. So it's just not communicated right, you know. But so that was the beginning of scientists looking into, okay, what does climate have to do with the virus?
Yeah. Let's see, we maybe have time for one or two more questions. Are there any good things that have come out of climate change?
I think the best thing, this is going to be like the political answer. You guys are going to be like, oh, okay, Jordan. But let me say this: the best thing that could come, that will come out of climate change, is what I'm also hopeful is the best thing that will come out of COVID, that it does bring us together globally. We've struggled to both, you know, the fight against COVID, you guys are seeing it, how difficult it's been. That's like we're putting a magnifying glass on the climate problem. it's so hard for us to get past some of our interests and come together. But I think that's what's going to be the best thing about COVID. It's going to bring us, it is going to end up bringing us closer together. And climate can bring us closer together. That climate action that we take can make us better together.
Yeah, I think your presentation has been extremely inspiring, and hopefully we'll get some of these students who are watching today to do something about it and really kind of take a look at their lives and their families' lives and what they can do. Those little changes, I think, will really add up to a lot. And we are almost at the end of our hour here. So for everyone who had all these questions, I see them in the chat, and there are just so many, and we just couldn't get to them all. But they are like very thoughtful. I'm really glad that this talk has really inspired students and for teachers to really think about about climate change and what they can do about it. As Jordan said, he has a presentation that I can send out to the teachers. So look in your inboxes and maybe your spam folders, because I know that this Zoom link even was like difficult to get to people. But if you don't see it in the next couple of days, feel free to reach out to me. But thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us today for Science Literacy Week and for teaching us a lot. I learned a lot, and I'm not going to say I'm a kid. I'm definitely not a kid. But I feel like I could be like in those movements and just be doing something.
You can do it too, Elaine.
Yeah,
Go do it.
I know. I'll pretend I'm a kid.
Everyone can do it.
Everyone can do it. You're right. We can go all from like age 1 to 99. So thank you again so much for joining us. So thank you, Jordan. And thank you to all the students and teachers and educators and everyone who decided to come and log in. I really hope you enjoyed our talk today, and I hope you feel inspired. I think that's the biggest thing today that we're getting out of this. So again, thank you. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and go vote.
Yeah, go vote. Everyone who can. Merci.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Merci.